Welcome back to the Build Your Legacy Insurance Edition podcast. Today, we've got a new member joining the podcast, but not a new to us member, Miss Whitney Oliver here. Hey, Whitney, how are you doing?
Hey, I'm good. I've been looking forward to this.
Thanks for taking the time to sit down with us. We've been talking about this for a while.
We have, I know. So I'm really excited to be here and do this with you.
Definitely. So wanted to bring Whitney in today because, I like to call her our operational expert, right? And
That's right.
And one of the things that we get asked all the time is, how do I get started? How do I start my agency? How do I run my agency? And you work very closely with our members on this side of things.
I do, yeah.
A lot of our members are really good insurance producers, but the day-to-day of their agency, what they need to operate, that's where they ask a lot of questions.
That's right. I think it's just a different skill set, right?
It is.
Being an insurance agent versus being an agency owner or even a business owner for that matter. I think it's just different.
It is. And now you're uniquely positioned because of your experience in the industry to help these guys. So why don't you tell us a little bit about how'd you get into insurance? Where were you prior to this? And what makes you so uniquely qualified to help these guys?
Right. I mean, I think I got into insurance about the same way everybody else in the insurance field did, which was just by accident, right? Everybody just kind of falls into insurance and then ends up sticking. But yeah, so I've been in insurance now for close to 16, 17 years.
Yeah.
I spent 10 years on the agency side. Kind of did everything in the agency.
Yeah.
Went from like mail sorting to rating to CSR to producing to eventually managing, being the personal lines marketing manager for a large independent agency out of Greensboro. So I've done all of that. I've kind of done the agent side and now love this position because it's given me more of an ability to work with agencies and help them actually start their own businesses and kind of get to help them from like the ground up with building things, which I love. So. Yeah, so it's been fun. I've been with SI for North Carolina now for 6 years.
Gosh, has it been that long?
It's been 6 years, yeah. And you and I together obviously have brought on and worked with several members with getting them up and running, both on the, kind of scratch guys, what we would consider to be scratch, but then also existing agencies too. And both obviously have different needs, have different things that they need from us. But it's fun to work with those guys. So, yeah,
definitely. And so you talked a little bit about your experience, which is wide-ranging in your background there. So we start all of our new members off with this agency foundation program. Like we said, they know how to write business. They might not necessarily know what they need as that owner to operate efficiently in the marketplace. So with that foundation, talk to me a little bit about that and what you're doing when we sort of hand them to you.
Right.
To get started and bring them into the family.
Yeah. So typically when the guys sign on, you guys bring them over to me and I get to work with them really closely for their first, usually 6 to 8 weeks of what we consider to be our foundation onboarding. And during that time, I mean, we run from everything from, the easy checklisty stuff, like you got to get an E&O policy, you got to get cyber, let's make sure that you've got your agency licensed, right? In the correct way. Setting up banking accounts, things like that.
Yeah.
And then really anything from that to now we've got to get you set up with a tech stack, right? You need an agency management system. You need a website if these are things that they don't already have in place. And I'm really holding their hand through that entire process.
Yeah.
It's a weekly touch point that we do. But obviously, there's going to be different needs for different members. I think, we kind of talked about that scratch versus existing.
Yeah.
But,
so I'm going to stop you there because you say, hey, there's different needs for different members, right? So as we look at this foundation program, the way I explain it is, hey, this is building your playbook. I'm a simple sports guy. That's where I go with my analogies. But no matter who you are, I'm sure there's some, I'd call them non-negotiables that in today's day and age, like you got to have it. Let's cover that. What are those non-negotiables that if you're getting up, you're starting an agency, you've got to have to get in the ballgame?
Right. So I think some of that comes back to tech, right?
Okay.
You've got to have a website. I think that's kind of one of the most important things that I talk to a lot about these guys. And we've got some great vendors, and obviously we can talk about those on a later podcast. But one of the main things is if somebody is Googling you, they want to see that you're a legitimate business. They want to see that you have a website. So you got to get a website in place, right? Agency management system, super important.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's not even just about that stuff. It's really, how do you want your agency to run? Day one is the perfect time to start putting that playbook in place, right?
Yeah.
Start with a procedures manual. Figure out, this is how I want things to do. Am I going to, how I want to handle cancellations, how I want to handle endorsements, how I want to handle servicing.
Yeah.
All of those things you've really got to build out from day one and then stick to it. And that's really where I help you as an accountability partner.
Yeah.
Right? We can do it however you want to do it. It's your agency. We just want to make sure that we're doing it in a way that makes sense for you and that I'm there to kind of help you put it on paper and actually stick with that game plan that you want to create.
Okay. So we talk a lot about, and I think you brought up a good point, like, hey, the management system, things like that, and, how you operate. As an agency that comes to us, I mean, we know carrier appointments is a big reason. Do these carriers look at your foundation of a business, and does that attract or I would say turn certain carriers off depending on what you're doing there?
I think it does. I think that the carriers want to see, one, especially for some of these scratch guys, they want to see that they're putting the right things in place to set them up to be successful.
Yeah.
If we've got somebody who says, I'm not going to invest in a website, I'm not going to invest in a management system, it's less likely that the carrier is going to want to invest in them, to be honest. So I really do work with these members, those first, like I said, 6 to 8 weeks of onboarding, with getting them prepared to get these carriers in-house with them, to get these carriers on board and wanting to work with them.
Yeah. Make sure you're putting out the right signals that, hey, this is where I'm going.
Yeah, exactly.
So we've talked about non-negotiables, right, and attracting the right things. But you brought up something there, hey, it is your agency. We can do what you want, right? And I think this is where we might delve more into the existing partners we work with, because we still work through the foundation with them as well, correct?
Absolutely. And we have existing agencies. And one of the biggest things with our existing agencies that we work with is a lot of times they've already got a couple of staff members. Maybe they've got a couple of CSRs. We're not there to change anything.
Yeah.
Right? We're not changing anything. We want to help them. We want to help them grow. We want to help them put, better procedures in place that are going to help them grow and be more profitable. But at the end of the day, how they want to run their agency is how they want to run their agency.
Yeah.
And we're not there to stop them from doing that.
So there's room there for creativity.
Oh,
if
absolutely.
I'm hearing you, right?
Absolutely. We want to make sure we've got the whole team on board, that everybody's working towards the common goal. And that, we're just at the end of the day trying to help them make the most money possible, right? And run their agency in the best way that they can. That's the plan.
No, that's great. So when you look at this foundation program, you mentioned 6 to 8 weeks.
Right.
Does it end there? I mean,
it doesn't end there. So realistically, that first 6 to 8 weeks, that's the meat of it, right? That's when I'm kind of there in your face. I'm holding your hand. After that, we go to a monthly touch point. At that point, we're kind of looking at, do we need to look at any additional carriers that we might bring on for you to have some direct relationships with? Are you utilizing everything you possibly can be out of that management system? And if not, let's kind of make some tweaks there. But that monthly touch point goes on for your first year.
Right.
After that first year, it goes to a quarterly touch point.
Right.
I say all of that, but obviously I'm still your on-call person,
Yeah.
right? If you need anything between those monthly touch points, I'm still going to be that main point of contact for you.
I was going to say, I think one of the jokes that we kind of have is a living organism, right?
That's right.
Hey, you're starting up, you're joining now. These are the things that we're going to work on. And to your point, staff, right? You might not have that today. 3 years down the road, we're going to come right back to where we were when we started, when we're dealing with hiring a new employee or
exactly. And your needs look so different day one than they do year 3.
Yeah.
Right.
But I think you and I've had, experience with some of our members where that work you've done day one with them, for example, like an employee handbook, right?
Right.
3 years later when they're making that hire, it comes in advantageous to where
That's
they
right.
can move through that process seamlessly.
That's exactly right. And we've run into that situation before where we tell these guys that's one of the great things we can work on during the foundation program, even if you don't have an employee.
Yeah.
Let's get an employee handbook in place for the day that you do have an employee and you need it to be in place.
Yeah. It's a great way to get started and think about things that you don't know what you don't know.
That's exactly right. And I have a lot of guys that some of the things that we'll go through in the foundation, they'll say, well, I didn't even know that this was something that I was going to need to do. But it's good for them to have a partner like us, obviously, to just kind of go through those items and say, these are the main things that you're going to need. And then these are the other things that we can kind of play with.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. I mean, it sounds like it never really goes away.
It never really goes away.
Yeah, we're
That's
always
right.
here. Well, look, Whitney, thanks for taking the time.
Thank you.
I'm
Glad
sure
to do
we're going
it.
to have you back, to talk about a bunch of other things over
Absolutely.
the episodes.
Anytime.
But, want to thank everybody for joining us here today. And, go like, subscribe, check us out on YouTube, Buzzsprout, anywhere you can sort of find your major podcast these days. So thanks again, and we'll see you again here soon.
Thanks for tuning in. You can catch our Build Your Legacy Insurance Edition podcast on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. Be sure to subscribe, leave us a review, or send us over a topic recommendation at podcast@siaofnc.com. If you're interested in learning more about what we do, visit us online at www.siaofnc.com. We hope you enjoyed our newest episode. See you next week.